We talked a little bit in the beginning about where can I put a SCENAR. And really it is easy. You know, one of the biggest things I had initially was trying to figure out, well, where do I put it? How hard do I turn it up? Do I, really make them jump, or am I kind? So again, it's really easy. Is there a spot of pain? If you can point to it, instinctively we go, like, oh boy, that hurts, and you put your hand there. Well, instead of putting your hand there, just put the SCENAR on it. If it's a region of pain, then treat the region and try to get it to condense to a point. And then use the point of pain protocols to get rid of it. If you can't describe it at all, such as something like people with fibromyalgia would be a good example. It's all over. Then you start treating using kind of the global area techniques, and these are called actually areas of general regulation is a term that they use a lot in SCENAR work. And what those will do is affect global change. It doesn't mean you treat the entire body necessarily, but it's more that these protocols have a global effect. And then they'll change it hopefully into like a region for you, and then you start working that region or a horizontal, that dermatome. Horizontals are also called the dermatomes. And you condense it to a spot, and again, that's the goal. You keep trying to make it something big, something small, and make it change. Just a little bit about the global therapy process. When you're using that, you're looking for a systemic response. You'll have a change at some point. There are different protocols. These are things you'll get on the handouts in actually probably a few minutes. The 3 pathways is something that we're going to do. We'll talk about the 6 points of the face, the collar zone, which is just as you would expect, just this top zone, the abdominal zone, because there's so many things in the abdomen that you can treat by doing something like an abdominal spiral technique. Palm zones, the size of your palm, here, the sacrum, so these two. There are smaller zones that you can just place an electrode, which would be, say, at the thymus, for example, C7, the little projection of the prominent spine point that sticks out in people's necks. So those are the large areas, but there are also smaller areas on the skull, using some of the attachments you can use, the neck, the ears. What Dr. Arena was just talking about, socks and gloves. These are the socks. These would be the socks. These would be the gloves. And that has to do with reflexology. So when you're brushing over in reflexology, you're covering just about every major organ. So you can expect some systemic responses. The dermatomes are great, but you can't forget about what the people from China and everything else and have taught us about acupuncture, meridians. All of this stuff ties together. That's why it's such a cool device. And then going on down to the smaller areas. We also talked about where to treat. Now there's a lot of symmetry in our bodies, and there are planes. There are planes that you just pass a mirror through here and you have an up and a down. So if I'm treating this shoulder, I can also treat down here. Or probably easier would be like an elbow and a knee. Okay. There's also a diagonal, so I could treat this knee and this shoulder and have the same effect. Now that sounds a little strange, but when you have somebody in a cast and they come in and say, my arm's really bothering me under this cast, it's really hard to get to the skin there, so you just treat over here, and it affects that. Now, the first time I heard that, I went, right. And then I did it, and I thought, oh, that's cool. So it does happen. And like I say, it doesn't have to be close. You also can pass a mirror right through this plane, and you have a front and a back. So if you have a pain here, you can also treat the pain in the back. So think about the symmetry planes, and what you'll find is sometimes when you're treating a site, it doesn't work. And you go, but that's the point of pain. When you add in one of these, what you may find is the mirror site is actually driving all the pain, not the point that you're on. So that's the trick in all of this. And here's something that just illustrated it. You know how you're always surfing around? This was on the internet, and I thought, oh, this is really a great story. So this was a practitioner had written in, and he was talking about how he was diagnosing problems. And one was the lungs are supplied by the thoracic nerves coming out of the spinal vertebrae, T3. So whenever he would run into a problem with people with lung problems, that was always sticky. And then he told a story about this lady who had Montezuma's Revenge, and she comes in, and the kidneys are supplied by T10. So he's working on her, and he finds out, I forgot which side, I guess the left kidney, when he palpated it, was really, really tender. And that also was a spot that formed an asymmetry. So you see these things tie together very nicely. And I just thought that was a good way to maybe illustrate it. So don't be too surprised that it may be indicative of an organ issue or something going on with the person when you find these. A little bit about chronic and acute again. One of the big things you're always asking about is how much time do I spend on a person? And the answer is a little tricky. It's not right now because we're just talking about SCENAR technology, but it'll get a little trickier when we talk about cosmetic. But the trick is it's just real easy because it doesn't matter in cosmetic. It does tend to matter in SCENAR. So for an acute injury, you're treating it. It just occurred. You treat it a lot and often. What you want to do is really kind of quiet the complaint down, whether it's pain or whatever, and then back off. And as it resurfaces, go in again. Quiet it down. Back off. Let the body tell you when it's time. For more chronic conditions, you don't really want to overwork them. They've had them for a while. You're looking to affect a change, and typically it's somewhere in the 15 minutes to 60-minute range. Less than 30 minutes is ideal if you can do that. And you're treating it less frequently. So maybe every other day, as an example. And every other day may hopefully get farther and farther where it's every 3 days, every 4 days. So you keep walking it out. And once you get it past about every 3 days, I don't hear accommodation, depending on the SCENAR you used. Accommodation is where the SCENAR just doesn't seem to be effective all of a sudden. And that probably means you've been overusing it too much and you need to back off and let the body readjust. Some SCENARs I found are really sensitive to that, others aren't. So that's just my interpretation of those having used them. Total number of sessions, if someone asks you for complaints, it's going to range. It's really going to be dependent on what's going on. Leave it to the person. The next thing that we hear a lot about is how much power are we applying? Well, guess what? It's back to our problem again of is it acute or chronic? If it just happened, the technique is high power, high everything. If you have a manual system, it's high frequency. Put as many spikes as you can. Put them as close together as you can. High is the magic word. And what you're trying to do is particularly if you've ever done this and you're lucky enough to own a scanner, you stub your toe and you're going to, you're not sure it's broke or not, but the toenail's going. If you put the scanner on it and crank it up until the device is actually higher than the pain, it will be comfortable. No, but what'll happen is, yeah. Actually, this was a different Russian doctor that taught me this. And pretty soon that'll be shunted. You will win. You will override the signal, and then you can start dialing down a little. And you take it off, and you go, oh, that's better. And of course it blossoms again, and you do the same thing. So that's what you're doing with the acute situation. You're not going to do that to a chronic person. They won't like it. Particularly someone like fibromyalgia. You'll find that with, again, it does depend on the type of SCENAR, and this is kind of a cast net for all of them. But with the Dove and also with the, particularly the Cosmotic, if you would just kind of take one and pass it, you'll find that you still will end up instinctively turning it up, but you may not take it to the full extreme like I would on some of the others. The others I'd crank high power. I want to get out of that pain. So, for me it's like, okay, I'll take a couple of second hit and, it'll be fine. Yeah. No, they turn it up. I do not turn it up. That's when you pass it to them and say, please turn that up until you feel this, and then drop it down when, it'll start changing so they can start lowering it. The next thing to talk about is a dermatome, and this is a picture. We're all kind of zebras. When we're born and as we grow, if you take the spinal column, you'll just see these lines that come out at each spinal column, all the way from the cervical all the way down to the tailbone. And out of those generate a series of nerves that innervate organs, everything else, but they're also tied to a skin zone. So everything, therefore, is reflected, skin, bone, whatever, through these dermatomes onto the surface of the skin. And on the SCENAR systems, when you're working, what will happen when you have an energy cyst that's formed, it's going to drop the impedance, or it's going to change. And you'll actually feel this effect. We'll test this in a minute. You just slide it over your arm, and you'll find an area where the SCENAR just hits, and it just sticks. Well, that's because that area is not the same as the areas around it, and the dermatome is signaling you at this point something's going on. And our job as SCENAR users and practitioners is to find the one that is the strongest in the area of the complaint, and then we're going to change that, and the person will feel better.